Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 107 of the Not Joanna Eggs podcast. This week, Robin and myself are discussing The Pagemaster, the 1994 animation live-action hybrid movie starring Macaulay Culkin as a nerdy boy who is taken away to the world of books to have an adventure or something. I don't know. It's like 75 minutes. It's, I guess, fairly innocuous, but the storytelling is not great. Whatever. We checked it out. This is it. I apologize if we get kind of meandery, but like the pacing of the film is just so weird for being so short that it was kind of hard for us to keep track of stuff. So either way, I hope you guys enjoy this one, and hope that you are staying safe and taking care of yourself, and that this episode finds you as well as could be expected. Thank you so much for listening, and hope you guys like this one. Take care. Bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Not Joanna Eggs podcast. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Robin.
And we've got a weird one of those hybrid animated films for you again. But unlike Roger Rabbit, this movie doesn't work for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is not because it has Macaulay Culkin's weird mouth animated. Like, I mean, look, I like Macaulay Culkin. He's an interesting dude. It's just weird to see his mouth on an animated character. It's also weird to see Christopher Lloyd as like a vaguely rapey librarian. But we're talking about the Pagemaster. I mean, he's come on, he's a little creepy.
Did they make him creepy, or was Christopher Lloyd just chewing all the scenery?
Okay, look, he can do both, but the problem is that, like, I think the reason that his library is so abandoned all the time is because of how he conducts himself with kids. Like,
the way he just like grabs him and starts talking at him. I don't know if he's like Raymond Peter here.
No. I mean, like, he's not like actively hitting on him, but it's like there's a weird threshold that goes between where someone's trying to be mystical and mysterious in a kids movie, and then to them just seeming like they want to touch kids. This character really kind of skirts that line. So yeah, I don't know. At least that's how I felt about it. But all right, so let's talk about this. This is The Pagemaster, the 1994 film. I guess it was directed by two different directors, because half of this, or a part of it, like I'd say maybe like 15 minutes or so of it is live action, and then the rest is animated. Yeah, so Joe Johnston was the live action director, and like he's got a pretty huge oeuvre of like films. So he's got Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Jumanji, Jurassic Park 3. I guess he was also involved with The Rocketeer, The Wolfman, and Captain America, The First Avenger, which is like was kind of like to me like the first really, really good Marvel film. Yeah, I mean, like they know what they're doing, but I think that he has since like pretended like he was not involved with this movie. Maybe it was the animation director that was Maurice Hunt, who, I mean, he sounds cool because like he had worked on The Black Cauldron, Rescuers Down Under, and Fantasia 2000. I guess this was the first movie that he had directed. I don't think it treated either of them very well, because this movie is notoriously not well received.
It definitely is not good. It's not great.
No. So the basic premise of this film is that Macaulay Culkin is this very, I wouldn't really call him nerdy. Well, I guess he kind of is.
He's definitely nerdy. He's also just a fucking weenie.
No, he's such a weenie. And so his character's sort of overarching thing is that he's obsessed with safety statistics, which is like, generally, if someone's going to that kind of extreme with an interest, it's usually because there's some kind of trauma that's tied to it. So I was trying to figure out if like something had happened to him, like maybe he had been in an accident or he had witnessed something and it traumatized him, because most kids his age would probably be really into like dinosaurs or video games or cars or something like that. Why safety statistics? Like, he'd have to read about that. So it's not like, I don't think he doesn't like read books.
Well, yeah, that's the joke. Is that like the purpose of this movie is to like, it's to make kids more interested in books as opposed to TV, but like the main character already reads. Like, they make a joke about him bringing a medical journal to Little League, which also, where did he get that?
I don't know. I mean, like,
because it's clear that he doesn't have a library card.
Yeah, like
at the beginning of this.
Like, what, he just goes to Books A Million with his mom and just says, "Oh, Mom, let's go to the DSM area."
This was the 90s. They didn't have Books A Million yet.
No, they did. Oh, yes, they did.
Oh.
Just this whole movie in general, it just feels like you're standing in a Barnes & Noble, because like you're seeing images of authors and characters and stuff like that, but there's no real like fundamental understanding of what the books are supposed to be about. It's just like superficial in how they project it, and I think that that's like the biggest disservice, because I think that this could have worked if they went in a direction of Wreck-It Ralph or something, with like the kid going into certain stories and everything, and then you spend like maybe a good 20 minutes enjoying the world that surrounds it. But they don't do it. It's like a second.
Yeah, it's much too much of like snapshots of moments, and in ways that do a disservice to the text that they're trying to do something with.
And the fact that they're all in the public domain is incidental.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's a reason that they chose all public domain books.
Ironically, they were all things that I don't think Disney had anything to do with, or like they probably wouldn't be able to.
Exactly.
except for Treasure Island, which they had made into a live action movie in I think the 60s or the late 50s, and then of course with Treasure Planet later in the early 2000s.
Right. But they can't claim Treasure Island.
They can't claim Treasure Island or Jack and the Beanstalk or like pretty much any of these other ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Macaulay Culkin's character, he's such a weenie. His dad is trying to connect with him, and I'm trying to build him a treehouse, but he's terrified of heights and shit. So eventually, he sends Macaulay Culkin over to take his bike to the hardware store to pick him up a pound of nails to help finish the treehouse.
Is that how you measure nails when you buy them by the pound?
I think generally, like he gave him the one to like show the guy at the hardware store, and then like they'll just get him a pound, you know.
Yeah, I just assume it's carpenter nails or something. But
so essentially, he goes there on this bike, and like he looks like such a nerd. I'm sorry. Like,
oh no, it's terrible.
His bike
it's
setup
awful.
is terrible. He's got like everything is done up in the hazard, like the orange and yellow shit.
Yep.
Like, oh god.
He's got like a giant. It looks like a children's size cop helmet, like bike helmet.
Yeah.
And this giant yellow raincoat.
Everything has reflectors on it. Like it's like, kid, you live in like presumably the suburbs of LA, because there's a scene later where he enters into the library that has like a mosaic tile thing right at the steps before you get into the door that says Los Angeles blank library, something like that. Yeah. So I mean, like that, or it's just because they shot it there. But
I mean,
I was like, kid, come on, like you're not gonna. It's not like you live in the mountains or whatever. Yes. Like it's like this kid needs therapy. Yes. Like whatever's going on with him, I don't know.
But so he goes to pick up the nails, and then a pretty righteous storm hits.
like God just hates him, I guess. He's just be like, for being such a weenie, I'm going to try to kill you.
As a test of your courage, I'm gonna try to murder you. Pardon me?
It's like the story of Job, but about books. So
not at all.
It's nothing like the story of Job.
Not at all. Gotta stop comparing things to Job, Tracy.
I know. I just like comparing it to Job, just because that story is so sad and has basically no point. So then once he gets into the library itself, he's the only one in this otherwise abandoned library until big pedophile energy Christopher Lloyd shows up and is basically trying...
I just think he's a little too intense.
I get that he's trying to want him to like be more adventurous and like read more stuff, but like he needs to stop like coming so close and like basically having his hands out, like trying to approach him when he's telling him about different genres of literature. It was just like, okay, back up, guy. It's too much. So he gives him a library card. Of course, like Richard's trying to just find his way over to the payphone to tell his parents so they can come pick him up or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he starts wandering down these corridors, and lo and behold, there's this huge rotunda mural that's honestly very beautiful.
Yeah, no, I love that mural.
Yeah, it was neat. And but then of course you got to have some whimsy coming out, so all the paint starts dripping, and then basically chases him with a dragon head.
Wait, hold on. Here's the thing we miss, which I think is somewhat crucial, is that when he's standing there, there's some water dripping off his clothes, and he like goes to turn and slips and falls and bonks his head, which makes me think that his entire journey is like a concussion or something. Like
pretty much, yeah. Like
that would
like,
hurt a lot.
Like he's having some kind of brain damage.
So yeah, but then the paint starts dripping down and chasing him,
because it starts off as like a dream sequence kind of thing.
Yeah, it's exactly what it's like. Like he hits his head, he falls down, and then literally just spins the camera around. And it gets darker, and then the paint starts dripping.
Yeah, and then of course the paint starts following him, and it starts like making all like the book stacks start to look animated, and then like I mean, like he looks like he's legitimately terrified, and I probably would be too, because he's about to be smothered by paint, which is not usually, that's not the way I want to go personally.
It's not my preference. I do want to point out, I remembered this when I was watching. I was like, oh yeah, when the paint drips down and then it forms into a dragon for a moment, The head of the dragon is in like all orangey yellow paint, and it just always reminded me more of like macaroni and cheese than paint in that moment.
Like Cheezosaurus Rex got real. They had to soften him up a bit. They're just like, guys, we can't go with this one. He's too scary.
Wait, this is not gonna work, guys. So I always thought of that when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, like, admittedly, the texture does look, especially for 1994, which is when this came out. It looks pretty good, like for CGI and everything.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, but it's I think like now we get to the shitty part of the movie, which is where it's animated.
Yep.
This is something that was overarching for me. I wasn't sure if you had noticed this, Robin, or if it bothered you, but for some reason, all the color once he gets into the animated world and realizes that like he's a cartoon and he's trapped in this library, the color is just, it's so gray looking. Like they really like saturated it with way too much gray, or it's just way too dark to really make out a lot of detail, and it seems dreary to me. Like it's just not very fun to look at.
Yeah, I didn't get that as much watching this.
All right, well, I guess we should probably talk about the first character that he encounters, which is a book named Adventure, voiced by your boy Patrick Stewart.
Poor Patrick Stewart, you deserve so much better. Whoa, wait, hold on.
What?
Pause, because he does meet Adventure, but before that he meets the Pagemaster.
Oh god, the fucking Pagemaster.
Who is
this bearded asshole.
Yeah, it's Glinda the Good Witch, probably.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's like he's like a bearded version of Glinda, and it's just be like, what, you really think that he wouldn't have believed you? Nope. You're an adult. You're not supposed to lie to children.
You have a fucking responsibility.
You have 3 passes: the Tooth Fairy, Santa, and the Easter Bunny, okay? Everything else you have to be straightforward with them.
Yeah, so the Pagemaster shows up and tells him, find the exit sign and look to the books.
So, which is like basically just opening them up to use them as tools, essentially.
Yeah, no, they're magic. Use them to do things. But then we meet Adventure,
played by Patrick Stewart, and I'm pretty sure that this was this the peak of him being in The Next Generation? Because if this came out in 1994, he would have been recording this probably 92, 93, I would say.
Yes, I'm not sure.
Either way, like, he would have been a pretty big ticket at that point.
What I would like to know that seems potentially interesting is Whoopi Goldberg was in The Next Generation. And
yes,
she
plays
was another character in this movie, Fantasy, which is the next book we meet, who makes a lot of weird jokes about her pantyhose.
Yeah, it's gross. I don't want to hear about that.
I hated it. Every time it occurred, I was like, I'm uncomfortable.
And that's the thing that kind of gets me, is that I don't hate the design of having, like, basically giving the books faces on their spines, but I think the problem is that, like, they just try to go to do too many extremes with some facial things, like, especially with Whoopi Goldberg in horror. I get that they're trying to do it to, like, make them funny, but there's so many jokes that fall flat in this that it's like, it's really kind of a shame, because I think that the script is overall like just the biggest problem with this. Ironically, in a movie that's supposed to be about books, it's poorly written. I guess I just thought a lot of the characterization was kind of lazy. Like they just mostly use puns as their humor.
I forgot how many bad book puns there are in this movie.
Yeah.
The one that always sticks out to me is, so late in the movie, there's this like moment initially of like, there's this kind of tumultuous relationship between Fantasy and Adventure, but like near the end of the movie he like kisses her and there's this weird romantic thing, and then he makes the joke, why don't you curl up with a good book, and then she like presumably kicks him.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I think
weird.
She punches him, which is like,
yeah.
I mean, and also it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, we're kind of jumping ahead, but like,
yeah,
Adventure basically just has a problem with everybody.
Yeah, he's just extra surly.
I think it's just like he causes a rift between both himself and Fantasy and himself and horror, and it's just like, oh, he kind of has to fix all these things. But
yeah,
we don't really get to know any of them all that well. It's just like Fantasy's thing is that she's sassy. Adventure's thing is that he's a dick, and Horror's thing is that like he's just a sad boy.
Yeah, he's a scaredy cat. So I do like about the design of specifically Horror, I think, is the best one, because he's just like this beat up old book, but also like his arms are extra long, so they like drag on the ground. And he kind of has like a Frankenstein-y sort of face. Frankenstein's monster.
The one thing that I kind of wish that they had done, like what I thought would have been a funny joke, is that if Richard actually met a statistics book and that was voiced by Ben Stein, and then just realized how boring they really are.
Oh my god.
I'd just be like, Richard, do you really want to be doing this for the rest of your life?
Oh, good. but I do hate Ben Stein.
He meets Adventure. Adventure says, like, hey, I want you to be my ticket out of here. Like, if I help you get to the exit, will you check me out so that I can leave the library, which is essentially prison for books, I guess.
Yeah, it's very strange. There's this whole thing of, like, I get what they're going for, which is, like, books want to be checked out. Like,
yeah,
books want to be read. The whole, like, anthropomorphizing them and then giving them this element of, like, I want to get out of here seems very, like, it reads very strange. He meets the 3 books, adventure, fantasy, and horror, and then they walk into what to me looks like an asylum, but is supposed to be a house.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Dr. Jekyll's house from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, who's voiced by Leonard Nimoy, like another Star Trek person. Like, granted, he's from the original series, but still.
Yeah, listen, everyone, they just wanted all of Star Trek. They couldn't get William Shatner to be the kid. He wasn't into it. Also, they weren't sure how to handle the transition from normal actual child to suddenly sounds like William Shatner.
That would have been great. Honestly, what would have been worse is if William Shatner was the Pagemaster. That would have been infinitely more awful.
God.
Just be like, "Welcome to the library. Could I interest you in something
I need you
to read?
Look to the books."
Yeah, it's stupid.
Talk about hammy.
Yeah.
So once he meets the 3 books, it becomes this, like, crappy sort of jump from book reference to generic reference.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they basically think that they can just drop the title and then that's sufficient.
That's enough.
Yeah, so they have like this kind of action set piece where Dr. Jekyll, he has a cocktail and then he turns into Mr. Hyde. And then he basically just tries to murder the books and Richard. But, like, it doesn't feel like there's really that many stakes because it's like they're just going to run upstairs and then Horror gets stuck in this chandelier or something. And they're just like, no, we have to go back and help him. And then Fantasy calls Richard like a pussy, basically. And then she goes to help him. And she's just like, you need to grow the fuck up, Richard. Like, everyone in this movie kind of hates him. Which is just like, I mean, that shouldn't be your main character should not be this unlikable.
No, that's the thing. Well, that's the other thing. Like, there are certain points in this movie where, like, I lost my friends, and I was like, you've known them for 5 minutes, and also, like, we as an audience, it's almost impossible to have an emotional stake in this.
Yeah, it's like we don't have enough time to really forge a connection with them. Like, even when I was a kid, I was like, this feels superficial and dumb. Richard, if these are the only friends that you have and you're 10, it's like, I don't think that there's like an inherently okay, look, like, I know there's a lot of characters where it's like they show that they're being bullied, which is supposed to make them more sympathetic. It's like Richard seems to actively push everyone else away. Like, his parents are attempting to get him to be more socialized and to be able to hang out with kids. And all he does is just quote statistics and basically act like a weird, morbid know-it-all. It's like, no, like, there's a reason these kids don't want to hang out with him.
It's not a matter of like, oh, he's just like a good kid. I mean, he is a good kid, but like, he is also kind of goes out of his way to be unlikable, right? Like,
it's like he's so afraid of everything that no one really wants to hang out with him.
Yeah, the one that sticks out to me is like his dad's working on the treehouse and he's like, why don't you come up and check it out? And he goes, Dad, do you know that like 3% of like 7% of blah blah and 4% of blah blah? And that's like 11% chance of blah blah. Like, 11% is nothing.
It's like there's an 89% chance that nothing will happen to you. Get up the ladder, you fucking wuss. Like, just like, and like I wanted to bully this child. I'd just be like, you can't just like stay in your room all the time. It's bad. It's bad for you.
He does this smarmy like, can't argue with statistics, Dad, because
like,
his dad falls out of the treehouse. But that was literally the fault of you, the kid, because you weren't paying attention.
Yeah, it's like that's what Richard. You were the variable there, because if you can't be bothered to watch the bucket to make sure it doesn't hit your dad's head, that's your fucking problem.
Yeah.
It's like he asked you to bring it up there, just make sure that, you know, like, that's just basic safety standards. It's like, you're not practicing what you preach, you little douche.
Yep. God. I do want to talk about a few of the things, like the books they reference, obviously Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which has this weird, like, 5-minute thing where he's, like, trying to kill them with his cane for some reason.
Basically laughing and shouting a lot. There's a lot of shouting in this, and,
it's not,
misplaced laughter. It's weird.
And after they escape, they get into a boat, and they see Captain Ahab and a few, like, they see some whaling vessels hunting Moby Dick, and then Moby Dick appears. Ahab says some iconic lines, and then that's it. Like, that's the scene.
It's like the instant I saw that, I was like, oh, Robin's going to have some things to say. Because, like, you've read Moby Dick a lot, or, like, you pretty much had to for some classes.
I've read Moby Dick, like, 5-ish times.
I mean, and that's a lot, because it's a dense book, and most of it is just, like, it's most of it's just more like a marine biology book, kind of.
Yeah, so Moby Dick is a poor example because Moby Dick, for a child, would be really boring. For this kid, it might be interesting because a lot of it is whale anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
However, what makes Moby Dick good is the last, like, 3 or 4 chapters, which is what this scene is trying to reference, but without the intensity of understanding who Ahab is and his, like, single-minded drive to kill a whale and all the things packed into that. Like, this scene is just really weird, right?
Yeah, he just comes across as a crazy person that hates whales.
Like, yeah, he just seems about... It's the Ron Swanson joke. Just a good old-fashioned tale of a man who hates an animal. But I remember this from the trailer, because there's a moment where he's like, I'm going to attack the whale or whatever, and each of the books says something like, he's a madman, he's insane, or something like that. He's my kind of guy. And I remember that from the trailer.
Yeah, it was a super obvious trailer shot.
But also, like, there's a lot there, right? Like, the whaling boats in this idea are, like, 3 rowboats. There isn't...
Yeah, they're dinghies.
Yeah, there isn't a giant whaling vessel attached. Which also, like, it's not hard for a whale to destroy a rowboat on accident.
It's like those are the boats that you go onto to try to escape said whale attack after it's destroyed the larger ship that those boats came from.
So they have the big whaling vessel, which is basically like a moving factory. And then they have the whaling ships, which are the smaller, like, dinghies, sort of, that when you see the whale, you go out in to try and kill the whale. But there's, like... I think like 3 or 4 of them, like, attached to this ship. But there should also be a larger ship.
Generally,
in that.
Yes.
They also... I'm angry because it doesn't do the best line, which is just... Nor is it well delivered, but, like, the best line is just anytime Ahab encounters another ship, it's just, hast seen whale? That's it. And if they say no, he just leaves.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, like, and then his first mate is the one who's talking to them and like, hey, blah, blah, blah. But here it's just, have you seen him? And who is him? The whale!
The thing that I'm known for. You've never met me, but you should know this.
Yes. It's not well done.
I don't know. Like, I guess, like, to contrast this, like, there's a reason they didn't show him going to Oliver Twist, because most of Oliver's life sucks, and everyone he knows dies. His mom dies in childbirth.
If there's one thing you need to understand about Charles Dickens...
And Charles Dix.
Charles Dix. Good old Chuck Dix.
Charlie Dix. How the hell are you?
How the hell are you, buddy? No, if there's one thing you need to know about Charles Dickens is that he was paid by the word, and his books were released in serials, so they were released like chapter by chapter across a long period of time.
The man loves money. Like, we can say this.
Like it knowing those things, you're like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah. Let's get back to the plot, because then...
Yeah. So their boat gets destroyed by the white whale. We lose fantasy and horror. So it's just Richard and Adventure sitting on a plank of wood. Mm-hmm. They get taken in by pirates to Long John Silver. And I will say this, I like their depiction of pirates only because so many of them have so few teeth.
Oh, yeah.
They're not attractive, they're all rough looking. John Silver, they're like, I don't remember if he's missing a leg, but he just has no left leg. It's one leg and a crutch, and that's it.
Well, I thought that initially he had like a peg leg or something, but like even if he did, he'd still need the crutch for leverage. Yeah. I do like the fact that they had Jim Cummings do his voice, and he does great. Like, he's always great.
Oh, I forgot to mention that George Hearn does the voice of Ahab, which only means something to me because, of course, he was in everyone's favorite Angela Lansbury series, Murder, She Wrote.
Yes! We're talking about Murder, She Wrote, finally. Guys, it took over 100 episodes, but we did it. We're talking about Angela Lansbury's magnum opus, Murder, She Wrote.
God, I love it so much. Like, I remember, so I was looking up, I'm like, why does the name George Hearn mean something? And I was like, oh, it was an episode of Murder, She Wrote. That's probably why I know it, which is...
Just one episode, and you remember that.
It's because the credits and my mom probably being like, oh, George Hearn, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. The whole thing with, like, they're trying to go to Treasure Island, but all they can find is one gold piece, and then everyone freaks out. But apparently, fantasy and horror just show up, and I guess they, like, scare them, or, like, they kind of, like, attempt to fight them, but...
It's the bad comedy fight, like...
Slapstick hijinks ensue, essentially.
Yeah. It's not great. What?
But yeah, and then Richard decides to stand up to Long John Silver. He wants to take him with him, but Richard, he very like he's like a kid that holds a katana at the mall for the first time. Like he's just like trying to like point at him and just be like, "Don't make me poke you with this."
Yeah.
And they're just like, "Richard, you did it. You were so brave." It's like, no, but whatever. I guess he needs this.
He does need it. So they begin like wandering once they get a boat. They also reference Gulliver's Travels.
Oh God, yeah, that was
so while they're on the island, like trying to figure out how they're gonna go forward towards the exit, horror and adventure have like a thing where adventure like yells at him and horror just leaves, and later adventure finds him being attacked by the Lilliputians, the tiny people tying him up to the ground while he's asleep.
Yeah.
So he rescues him, and then
it's like they just needed a dumb fight for them to like have a conflict and then resolve it 2 minutes later. Like that's it. There's no real stakes with it.
But I legitimately don't remember how they move into the next section. I just remember
they were just wandering through the rest of the island, and then they make it to the fantasy section. Yeah. Because
Fantasy's wand just starts being a divining rod.
Yeah, pretty much.
It just buzzes when they're pointing towards the exit, so they follow it. To me, this, like, I put this in my notes, as like, we're not entirely sure what to do with the fantasy section. We don't want to reference anything specific. So here's a bad montage pop song.
Yeah, oh God. It's like, and this is, I don't know why this was a thing. It was such a trend that back in the early 90s, if you're making an animated film, you need to have a shitty pop song that you can play at a grocery store during the middle of the day. And, like, they have one of these in here, too.
Yeah. Well, and it was like, we took the Reading Rainbow song and it's and made it just disgustingly bad.
Yeah, well, at least the Reading Rainbow song is, like, catchy and you can remember the lyrics.
I adore the Reading Rainbow
song. It's a good song. It's great. It's just, there's something about this is that, like, when they're going through the fantasy section, there's, like, these weird fairies and shit that follow them around, but they're made out of electricity. And I was like, what? Like,
I actually thought that was really cool.
Like, watching them actually move around was neat.
Yeah.
There's, like, a shot of Humpty Dumpty. You get to see him die. So I guess that's cool.
Yeah.
We get to witness Humpty Dumpty dying because someone puts Richard's glasses on him. And I was like, that's terrible.
The death of Humpty Dumpty we all craved.
I mean, that was the thing about the fantasy section is that
Goose.
Most of it felt like it was just nursery rhyme stuff. And I'm like, I guess that's fantasy, but that's not quite advanced enough for Richard's age. Like, they're showing such a contrast of books.
Right, we're going from Moby Dick, dense tome about racism in the 19th century America, to Humpty Dumpty. Also, we make a pit stop at Gulliver's Travels, which is a whole different, like, mess of things going on.
And I think the thing is that a lot of those references don't work because, like, for a kid roughly Richard's age, they probably wouldn't have heard of those. At least, like, not that commonly.
No.
I mean, like, admittedly, like, now if you have an iPad or a Kindle or something, you can read a bunch of those books in the public domain. Like, no problem. You can download them for free. But I don't think that he would have really known that. Like, those felt like jokes that were clearly just geared towards adults that would have a working knowledge of, like, these books or, like, kind of know what they were about.
Well, it's like you said, right? It's like the decorations in a Barnes & Noble kind of, like, paying loose lip service to this book by referencing a thing. But what it really then trades in is the sort of, like, pop culture shorthand of Lilliputians being tied up, the white whale, right, without really examining why those things are important or why that they're iconic, which is...
That also just made me remember that Jack Black did a movie that was basically Gulliver's Travels, and I was like, that was a weird time.
I was thinking about that as well, and I was like, I don't... I don't want to revisit that concept right now.
I don't either. I was just be like, wow,
dark
like
time for everyone.
it just felt like a weird okay, I'll just say this, like I think that there are some books that just don't translate that well to now, that it's difficult to make a movie out of. Like adaptations of books are notoriously pretty hard to pull off if it's not if it's done in like a fantasy or otherwise like kind of abstract way. Like it's not like a direct lift like Eat Pray Love or something.
Right.
Some of these things, like it's too generationally different, and that there would be such a disconnect with the audience that it would be hard to make it work in an animated film.
That's the thing. Like, even though, like, iconic literature is iconic for a reason, but part and parcel of that often is that it's so embedded in the moment at which it's made, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, Moby Dick being a good example. Like, Moby Dick is a great book, and the final 3 chapters are some of the best writing you'll find in American literature.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, again, heavily embedded in racial politics of 5 minutes before the Civil War.
Usually, like, the most important books that have made it into, like, I don't want to say like the public domain or whatever, but a lot of those, they tend to be like
canon.
Yeah, the literary canon is that like there's some kind of radical thing that they're supposed to be there challenging or that they're commenting on in some way.
It's about embeddedness and the situation that creates the circumstances of the production of the thing.
And also you're trying to narrow down the material that's there into a digestible and well laid out plot within like an entire film. So like something like you've got like the 2 versions of The Great Gatsby, like the one that came out in 1970 something with Robert Redford, and then the one that came out in 2012, I think, with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's like a little soap opera-y, but you still have the fun and the appeal of the 1920s and the party scene that keeps people enticed. Like that's why that's still required reading for a lot of high schools, because it's like it makes sense. It's an easy read. It's like 200 pages, whatever, within the Pagemaster. They weren't really able to find very concise stories to do that with.
They're really reaching, and they're like trying to like rush through. I think if they wanted to do this better, you would get like sort of longer sustained moments inside of more like carefully thought out books.
Yeah.
So like you could do something with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde if you devote like 20 to 30 minutes to it as opposed to 5.
Yeah, exactly. So then, and that's the problem with this movie to me, is that it feels like I wrote this in my notes, but I said it feels like now that's what I call books, like the like a little bit.
No, it's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use that as a subtitle for this episode.
Yeah,
but
beautiful.
And obviously there's work that goes into it and everything, but it's like this movie's only 75 minutes long. I just wish that they had kind of extrapolated a little bit more on some things.
I think I do want to say, like, what I think this movie actually does surprisingly well is when it actually ventures on its own in the final sequence with the dragon.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's just because the dragon was really fucking cool.
There's a lot of good design in this. Like, don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like, I like the set design is awesome. Like, how they incorporate a lot of, like, you know, like using books to make cliff sides or something, or like mountain skates.
Yeah, that kind of stuff was so cool because it was very well done.
Yeah, and the soundtrack is great too. It was by James Horner, who is the same guy that did Fievel Goes West. Like, I've noticed that with 20th Century Fox, they tend to do really, really well with soundtracks. Like, when they come up with original scores, they're usually very memorable.
So the dragon sequence, we're kind of skipped around a bit, but after fantasy, like part and parcel of fantasy, and like into the finale, the climax is they wake a sleeping dragon, literally, and it chases them, and eventually Richard decides to try and fight it, gets fucking eaten.
Like, almost immediately.
Yeah, like...
The dragon's like, okay, that's cute, bye.
Well, you're a level 0 character with no class levels. Get fucked. So he gets eaten and finds Alice in Wonderland, so you get an off with his head joke for fun. And then he finds Jack and the Beanstalk, and the Beanstalk, he literally rides it out of
like that was dragon. Clever. Like, I liked that.
Yeah, that was super cool.
That was super clever. I like that.
And I liked that. Yeah, and that, like, I could have done without the repeated whispers of Christopher Lloyd saying, "Look to the books."
Yeah, it's just like, let him think of shit, Christopher, okay?
Well, yeah, so I think that's one thread in this movie that is ultimately not well done, is it wants to do this, like, look to the books because books are going to help you out, but, like, one, it only happens twice, and it's at, like, opposite ends of the movie, so it happens early on, after he meets Adventure, and he needs to get up, he says, look to the books, and they find 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And that happens here at the end. It seems like if they wanted that theme to be recurrent, they should have done it more often, but they don't.
I wish that they could have incorporated that more frequently, because that would have been neat. You know, like he could have found a copy of The Little Mermaid and then asked her for a ride or something. But maybe that would have been like then Disney would have been like, no, we own that. It's like, actually, fuckers, you don't. Hans Christian Andersen's estate owned that up until like the 70s or whatever.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like The Little Mermaid, so long as it's not Ariel, is public domain.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, there's ways they could have done that theme better, and that again I think would have hammered home this idea that like reading is fundamental, it's important, but they don't. So he rides the beanstalk up to the exit, and they see the Pagemaster again. He throws a fit at the Pagemaster, like a pretty reasonable fit at the Pagemaster, like screaming at him like, I got eaten by a dragon, I got captured by pirates, I got attacked by a whale. You're a shithead.
Yeah, it's like I was almost murdered by Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Like, he goes on this tirade. And again, he's right. Like, the kid is right.
No, yeah, he's right.
The Pagemaster's just like, but you're alive? Oh, don't you feel better for this journey?
It's like, if I had shown you where the exit was, you never would have grown or had the courage to do it. I'd just be like, that's not really the same thing. He didn't learn that from books. He learned that from a support network and friends that helped him forged a better sense of himself. Like, that was the crux of it. It's just like the books were incidental. It was trying to have those relationships with like the personalities of the books or whatever that helped him. It's like it's about having people that want you to be better. It's the books, they're just there.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Like the relationships between the characters, as poorly managed as they are in this movie, definitely have greater weight than, again, like we were just talking about, this like look to the books idea. It just doesn't sort of work out in this movie. And then he wakes up, Christopher Lloyd's reappears, and he's like, you took a nasty fall, are you all right? And then he checks out the 3 books.
No. So initially, Christopher Lloyd's like, you can only take out 2. And in my notes, I'm like, what kind of fucking library only lets you check out 2 books?
I was also going to ask this question. Like what? Anytime I've been at a library, they have restrictions on things like DVDs or CDs, stuff like that. But usually you can check out up to like 30 books. Generally? Yeah, I actually don't know, because I haven't been to a regular library in so long, because I work at a university, so I've been to a university library.
I used to go to the one that's closest to you when I was living up there. Especially for like kids' books, they would just let people check them out indefinitely. Or like you could check out as many as you wanted, but granted, they still had the fines. Like, that's how libraries make their money, aside from grants.
Fines will happen.
Yeah, and also another thing that they do at that library is that if books don't get checked out for a notable period of time, they will try to sell them every couple of weekends or something, just to recoup some of the costs from it. In general, I've never heard of any library that would only let him check out 2. Like, that just felt like a sick joke. Like, what an asshole.
It's a really weird restriction to be like, you can only check out 2 books.
Yeah, I was just like, it'd be one thing if they're like ones that are supposed to be kept in the library, like some of them, like they can't leave the premises because they're either really rare or they're valuable or something.
Right.
But I was like, what a douche. Come on. He's about to cry. Like, just let him take the book.
And he does. Right. So he takes horror, adventure, and fantasy home, and on the way home, he took the like guard off the front of his bike. 2, he no longer has his helmet or his coat.
Yeah.
And then like on the way home, he like rides up a shitty ramp.
Yeah.
That other kids in the neighborhood built.
He's like, I did it.
That was good. That was really good.
Yeah, and I hated the fact that they tried to give him a catchphrase that was like, this is not good. This is definitely not good. I'm just be like, are you trying to just get pantsed or something, kid? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, that was rough.
I was like, it's like, if you have this little faith in yourself and you're afraid of everything, talk to your parents and just say like, hey guys, I have crippling agoraphobia. Will you please help me? It's just... If he knows statistics, maybe he knows what phobias are.
It makes the way you said that makes me think of that fucking that Vine where the guy just like flips into a wheelchair and just goes, "I have depression."
Oh, that was iDubbbz, but yeah, I know the Vine you're talking about. But no, yeah, like it's and that's the whole thing, is that like his dad eventually, like, he finds Richard sleeping up in the treehouse with like his books, and they're just like, I don't know if this is better. He still doesn't want to go out and meet people, but I guess he seems happier now. And he's just like, I love you, son. And I'd just be like, why? He was missing for the whole day. Aren't you going to ask what happened to him? Where'd your coat go? Right? Like, what happened to your pants?
There's definitely like a point where they're like, so we see the parents come back and they're like, where is he? Look at the treehouse. And I'm like, how long has he been gone? Like,
well, I think that they said like, or like, oh man, like, do you think we should call the police or something? Like, they obviously went out to look for him and try to figure out what was going on. They're like, oh my God, do you think he was taken or something?
It was just kind of a weird moment, but and that's the Pagemaster.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Well, there's like kind of a thing where they have the silhouettes of the animated books talking to each other.
In the treehouse.
Yeah, and we see it. Adventure has gay panic because he's trying to get a kiss from Fantasy, and then Horror kisses him. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we got to throw that one in.
Why not?
Yeah, and then credits roll. Same shitty pop song from the Fantasyland starts playing again. And just
you knew it was gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't. Whatever message that they're trying to convey in this doesn't really make sense because his arc is just so non-existent. By, surviving the Hound of the Baskervilles, when you open up the book and the dog chases you, that made you braver. It's like, it doesn't at all.
I do want to take a moment because when they find the Hounds of the Baskervilles, that's a joke on like what it is Adventure's like, I know exactly where we are. Hounds of the Baskerville, B for Baskerville. And I was like,
yeah,
that's not how libraries sort their books.
No,
at all.
Well, yeah, and I think that there was in the adventure section, like it was right next to one that said kidnapped and something else. I forget what the other one was.
God. Oh, wait. There was. I did want to point out this visual gag. Is that after the dragon chases them before he goes to fight it, he like crashes into something.
Mm-hmm. Oh God, I know the one you're about to talk about.
Yeah, so one of the books that's on top of him when he gets up is Atlas Shrugged.
I was like, fucking one day where that goddamn book doesn't come up in my house.
It tickled me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was fun. There was one gag that did make me laugh, which is when Richard and the other books are over at Dr. Jekyll's lab, and he's explaining to them about, like, how he's in so much danger. And there's this one beaker or vial that they all walk past, where when Richard walks past it, his face gets kind of warped and stuff. And then when Horror walks past it, he becomes handsome. He's like, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
That kind of made me laugh. I was like, okay, that's kind of a good decent joke. But yeah, like, I mean, just in general, this movie is just a mess. I don't know. There's some animation, some of it can be okay, but for the most part, I would probably skip this one. If you're a really big Macaulay Culkin fan, then go for it, but I don't know.
The Razzies almost gave him Worst Actor for this movie specifically.
And the fact that this movie's only 75 minutes long, so it goes by pretty quickly, but you don't really feel like you've had a journey.
No, you just watched things happen.
Yeah, it was colors. It was things got your attention for about an hour, a little over an hour, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that's all I've really got to say. Like, the few positive things that I liked were totally overshadowed by all the stuff that just was such a weird idea. Because I had a copy of the book that they had put out for this or something. Like it was, so here's the thing: they made like an actual book about this, but it wasn't like one of those like the straight to like the junior novelizations or anything. Like they made it look like this actual like bound, nice looking book and everything. Like, and I think it was the actual story, which I would like to mention this before we end the episode, because apparently there was a legal case based around this because of the screenwriting credits. I'm going to mention this real quick. So there was some arbitration that was put into place with the Writers Guild of America because the producer was trying to claim sole authorship of the screenplay and the story, even though it was originally written and the concept of the story was made by a man named David Catchy. So they were
David Catchy.
Yeah, David Catchy.
Catchiest man in the biz.
Catch that, David. But yeah, so and this is based on, I found this online. Usually the credits are supposed to be sent to the WGA for approval before the film comes out, or even before posters and novelizations show up.
Yep.
But in this case, the producers said that as the film was now largely animated, the WGA did not have jurisdiction to determine credits, which I'm like, that doesn't fucking make sense.
That's horse shit. Fuck you.
So this Cashy guy, he wrote most of it under a contract with the WGA, and he had apparently also worked with Disney Television, so he had been doing this since the mid '80s, and those were under contract too. So the WGA is just like, well, David Kirshner, director, like this is fucked up. You can't be saying saying this. So there was an investigation and interviews of people that were working on the project, and then 3 people that worked directly with David Kirshner. And the WGA said that David Kashey was in fact the primary writer, and that Kirshner did not provide sufficient creative contribution to the process to warrant any screenwriting credit. So they're just like, it would have been the case of like where a bully asks some kid to do, or basically tells some kid to do his homework, otherwise he'll beat him up, and then he writes his name on it, and just be like, no, Dick, it doesn't work that way. Once they got the determination, Fox was going to release the film without their approved credits, just because they're just like, well, fuck you guys, we've already wasted enough time doing legal shit for this.
God.
But they got a settlement taken care of, and then it was released with the proper screenwriting credits and everything, and some other guy that they included on there. I'm not really sure why. But apparently it was very expensive and took a long time and for the WGA to do on behalf of someone that they were working with. So it's like, guys, sometimes unions work.
Yeah, unions are important. Who knew?
And this is another thing that was just kind of unheard of, is that I think they were trying to remove some elements and some story beats that had already been written and animated while the movie was being animated. So like they were chopping areas of the script out while they were animating it, and so like you don't like do that. It's like
that's always a good idea.
It's like that's like unheard of. It's like it'd be one thing if you do it in a live action movie, which is like that's common. Sometimes the shoot goes in a different direction. They want to do some reshoots or something, but it's like no, like with an animated movie, the script is written out. Like you can't just like keep changing shit while you're animating it. It's like that's either going to lead to like spending way too much money, which was one of the problems that this had, is that it went way over budget. Just in general, like when you're making a script or like if you're making an animated film, you have to get that shit narrowed out, because if you don't, then you get stuff like Brave, which was also notorious for that too, is that they changed directors and they changed the pattern of where the script was going, which is why it doesn't flow that well and it doesn't make a lot of sense. I do like that, like that's one of the most notable things about this, is that like it had a big legal proceeding and now like it's really not finally looked at all because of those issues. And also because the movie's boring and it's not fun. So
yeah, it's not nearly as fun as it wants to be.
I guess that's pretty much all I've got to say about it. Any other closing thoughts, or should we do our handles?
No, I think we can close it there.
Okay, cool. Robin, where can they find you?
As always, you can find me at lobster_writer on Twitter, Lobster Writer on Instagram, and you can listen to my other podcast, Tabletop Buffoonery, wherever you get your podcasts, I believe. Tracy, where do they find you?
Thank you, Robin. They can find me on Instagram and Twitter via @TCTroush. We've also got our episodes put up onto YouTube. If you just look for Not Joanna Eggs, you'll find our little head logo, and that'll take you right to the channel. Whenever episodes are uploaded on our main podcast feed, you'll find them on there as well, because they're auto-uploaded at the same time. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's just kind of most of it. I'm a little bit sad because my sewing machine is in the shop and it may take up to 3 weeks for me to get it back. So that's going to suck. I'm going to try to see if I can borrow a friend's in the meantime, because then just otherwise, I don't know. It's just a pain. Like I can't find a new one anywhere. So I'm just trying to like stay busy with other stuff right now. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We hope you guys enjoyed this one, and stay safe out there. And maybe we won't die this year. Who knows?
I'm gonna make it through.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna make it through this year if it kills me.
If I have to start making my own underground bunker, I will do it. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening, y'all.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. Our intro music is Don't Hold My Breath by Ben Briggs. The outro is Wet Dreams by Phonetic Hero. Both were found on ocremix.org. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us, or tell a friend to check us out. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Find the show website via notjoannaeggs.tumblr.com. Follow us on Twitter via @lobster_writer and @TCTroush. Not Joanna Eggs, because animation is for everybody. Turn the bass up in my headphones.